right, let's kick it off. Hello, everyone, and assalamu alaikum, whichever part of the world you're in. I'm Ahsan Jamil. I'm the managing partner for Side Capital. We are investing in emerging technology companies in Pakistan. And with us, we have Dr. Ishrat. No introductions needed, but we'll take 10 seconds at least tell the people who may not be aware. You know, an accomplished banker, advisor, governor of the state bank. Multiple governments have picked his brain on policy. And it's a pleasure to have you with us today and to pick your brain and have a conversation with you. So, and thank you for taking time out to join. And with that, we'll kick it off with some basic questions. So tell us, Dr. Saab, you've been in the policy making space for a very, very long time. We want to have a lot of questions today around technology policy in particular, and hear your views on that space. So between 1990 and 2010-ish frame, a lot of foundational policy was being worked on in the Western world, on which the modern technology companies have grown. From 1999 to 2006, you were governor of State Bank and you were in the advisory space. When you look back at that period, can you share some of the policy decisions we missed that would have been very helpful for us for having a great technology future, something we're behind in today?
Well, thank you very much for asking me to join you. It's a great pleasure. From 99 to 2006, even beyond that, we took some very fundamental decisions on the entire telecom industry. There was PTCL, which had a monopoly, and it was all landlines except a few, two small struggling mobile phone companies who were not doing extremely well. So what the government did was to break up the monopoly, and it was a very contentious issue. And some of us, including myself, argued that now the technology is moving in a direction that we could have competition if we open it up to the private sector. So this was a major decision taken to open up the PTCL and then go for optic fiber, network in the whole country in order to enable the mobile phone companies to enter Pakistan. Second policy decision which we took was that we said that every IT company in Pakistan can be allowed to retain 35% of its earnings in their dollar accounts abroad, so that they can meet their expenses, they can do the marketing, they can do whatever they want. Even if they have to acquire some of the companies there, they have the capital, and if they want supplement to that earnings, the state bank will come to their help, and we will help them in acquiring companies outside Pakistan. We also gave income tax exemption for, I don't remember exactly, was it 15 years or 10 years or whatever it was, but we did. And then we went for spectrum auction, whereby, the private mobile companies came in. And the fact that we laid down the infrastructure at that time, opened up the sector, break up the monopoly, brought in the private sector. Today, you know where we stand as far as the telecom sector is concerned. So this is the beginning of the developments which have subsequently taken place. If we had not done, and I dread the day that we still have the monopoly of a state-owned PTCL, I don't know where we would be.
Fair enough. But when you look at companies, talked about, Infosys, TCS, Systems, Wipros of the world, other large global technology companies that have come from back then emerging markets, how would you look at some of the policy decisions we did not take that could have helped us? Any specific ones you feel were big misses that could have laid the foundation for a strong technology growth?
I have been in touch with NESCOM right from the beginning, and they had a very smart director, first director, Mr. Mehta, who died. And I have traced the evolution of the Indian IT industry. Their main advantage was that there was this scare about Y2K. And because the Indian technology companies were the only ones who knew how to solve this problem, everybody was hiring them all over the world. And that was the turning point as far as the Indian IT industry is concerned. If you look at before 2000, before Y2K, there wasn't very much in any other field except they were the contractors, consultants for the Y2K work all over the world. And that gave them a big advantage. Pakistan didn't have the human resources. India had the human resources. As you remember, the IITs and the IIMs and the engineering universities in India were way ahead of Pakistan. We didn't have a single institution, I would say, which will be of the world standard. We started at LUMS in 1980s, and IBA computer sciences also came in 1980s and 90s, but these are very small human resource factories. So that Y2K, plus the fact that India liberalized its economy after 1991 balance of payment crisis, there were a lot of Indians who were working in Silicon Valley. I remember Vinod Khosla, who came back to India, and because he had made a lot of money by selling Sun systems, he started his startup company, Venture Capital, in India. And that was also one of the contributing factors. None of these factors were, present in Pakistan. So when I visited Infosys in Wipro in Bangalore in 2004, they had 10,000 trained engineers. And I asked Narayan Murthy, I said, why did you locate in Bangalore? He said, the whole Karnataka has the best engineering universities and IT schools in India. And therefore, we can find the kind of talent we are looking for. And that's what Azim Premji also said to me. So they had what I call a cluster in Bangalore, which really helped the growth. And today, as you know, after TCS, Infosys, and Wipro are 150,000 people employed there. We don't have, I always wish that we could have even, 10,000, 100,000 is very far off, but there are very few companies in Pakistan who can reach that point.
Correct. And so let me build on that. So today, lately, in the last couple of years, in our ecosystem, we are finding whether people are developing technology products or they're doing technology services, we're finding that there is a realization that we have to add global value. We have to operate at a level that is adding value for global problems. So that realization has sunk in, and we've seen companies start to go in that direction and grow. But one of the challenges they have, and I know you're passionate in this space, and I'd like everybody to hear your view on that. One of the challenges that in their growth that they're having is that as talent is being trained, because they don't come readily from universities today as much as we would like. So a lot of institutions and companies invest in training and their associates. But a lot of those people are leaving Pakistan after a very short period of time. I mean, it's employment at will in most places. And these companies come to people like myself and others in the industry to say, hey, look, we want to grow. We're investing in talent to help us grow, but the talent is leaving. What are your thoughts in terms of macro policy, in terms of organizational policy? How should they view this problem, and how should they address it?
You're absolutely right. Let me give you some numbers. We produce only 25,000 IT graduates every year. But as you know, and everybody in your profession knows, that graduation is no longer the, selling point for employment. It is what skill set you bring to the table. So there are a lot of engineers who are unemployed in Pakistan. And I have been telling these institutions that you hold boot camps, you have short-term 6 months courses for certification in Google, Amazon, Apple, and others, so that they can acquire the skills which are marketable and which can be used for them. If we wait for another 4 years for these IT graduates to come in, we have missed a boat, because there is a huge demand for Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Indian and Filipinos in Japan, in Korea, who have aging population. The Japanese ambassador told me that he wants 30,000 Pakistani IT professionals by 2030. So I told the government that you work backwards and say how you're going to produce from 2022 to 2030 this 30,000 people who are up to the standards, because they were not satisfied with the standards of our professional education in our universities, except 2 or 3. They said to me that they will not be able to absorb them in their industry. As you know, Japan is a very high-end, very high demanding industry. And so Korea is also coming in, and in a few years, I suspect Germany is coming in. So what we have to do is not at the macro level, but at the level of the provinces which control most of the educational institutions, the technical and vocational training institutions, the engineering universities, and many other colleges, that we start these courses which are specific to the needs of the industry. I was told by the Secretary of Education, I was delighted, that he has not only started these training courses, but he has also started Japanese language courses, because that is a big advantage. If you know Japanese language, and if you are professionally sound, the chances are that you will be getting the employment as compared to others who don't know the language. And same is going to happen in Korea. The same is going to happen in Germany. So we should invest both in the language. And the other problem which I have seen, I still travel, and I meet a lot of Pakistanis and a lot of ambassadors of Pakistan. Our work ethic in Pakistan is something that we have to improve. You make a commitment to a company and say that I will join you, and the company is waiting for you, and then you get an offer from somebody else, and then you leave them high and dry without even informing them, and you join the other company. Now, it brings a very bad impression about our nationals. So one of my friends in Malaysia told me, Ishrat, look, I offered this guy a job, and now he has turned around and not even informed me, and I found out that he has joined one of my competitors. Now, you think I will be recruiting Pakistani again? But I said, well, this is the exception. He may be outlier, but you cannot generalize on the basis of one experience. But I'm just giving you the work ethic, discipline. That is also something which we have to teach our kids who are going out of the country.
No, very fair. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please. I didn't mean to interject. Go ahead.
I said Pakistan has a youth bulge. Everybody talks about it. And 60% of our population is below the age of 30. For God's sake, let us translate into some very visible gains for the country. And if you have demand within the country, and all your colleagues in your industry are complaining to me that we have an exodus of our trained people. We train them, and then they go away. And this is very true. And what we need is a pipeline where if the demand in Pakistan is, let's say, 50,000, and we have a demand of another 30,000 outside, we should produce more than 80,000, almost double of that. So the people who even leave the country, they can be replaced. And the kind of training which the colleges and the universities are giving is highly theoretical. When I was heading IBA, I had an advisory group of all the CEOs of the Karachi-based IT companies. And I used to tell them, tell my colleagues, the teachers, whether the syllabus and the curriculum and the pedagogical tools and the assessment methods they are using are acceptable to you as far as employment is concerned. And we used to get very good feedback, and we used to design and modify our curriculum and pedagogical tools in order to meet their demands. And our 90%, 95% of our graduates were hired even before they passed their final exam, because they were up to the expectations of the IT company. But you have to work hard on that.
Yes.
And bring in the industry along with you.
I couldn't, two thoughts on that. Recently, I have explored the Far East opportunity. Most of the companies in Pakistan look west. And so when you give examples of Japan and Korea and these markets, I think they're very interesting markets. They have very unique problems that if we get into the business of exporting intelligence, we should be in that game to solve. I mean, Southeast Asia captures most of the market in Japan because cost of technology is not as expensive. And the Japanese market is very, very integrated in there. I want to expand a little bit about the student and the training problem. I couldn't agree with you more that the connection between industry problems and academic knowledge is really vast. And now we have a second layer of a problem, which is that academic knowledge is falling behind with the advent of AI, in that space. Do you feel that from a policy perspective, what is it that the government could do to incentivize these institutions to teach higher level technology knowledge so that kids who come out from that space, our youth bulge, whether they do custom services or products, that what they develop is much higher? How can we create an incentive-based policy so these institutions teach these kids to do higher level work?
But Ahsan, the tragedy is that in the 1960s, when I was a student, most of these students in the universities in Pakistan were opting for science subjects, biology, chemistry, mathematics, physics, and others. And we had teachers who were coming in from the best universities in the world. Not many, but whatever we had, they were from Harvard, from Oxford, from Yale, you name it. Today, when I get a survey, because I was involved with the HEC some time ago, you don't find the professors, the faculty members who have been trained abroad. You have mostly the people who have been trained here. And what are they doing? They are actually not up to the mark as far as either the research capability or the teaching is concerned. We used to get Fulbright professors at that time. Really? Now the students are going for soft subjects. There were 33% of our graduates are unemployed. You go for Islamic studies, you go for languages, you go for history, you go for other subjects which are not in demand. But we have a shortage of science and math teachers. And I've been arguing for a long time that unless we start science and math from the school, STEM, I call now STEAM because creative arts is now becoming a part of the whole curriculum.
Yes.
And unless we do that, then we do not have the pipeline, as you and I are talking about, for the high-level professionals. it has to start from the schools. And then in the colleges and the universities, we should have people who will learn the trick of the trade in order to
Right.
become employable. And the best thing which I can narrate to you, which is successful, is in the fourth year before graduation, you don't attend the courses in the classrooms at the university. We assign them to the companies, and
Agreed.
they were solving the problems of the companies, and they were being assessed by the supervisor jointly, who was a company official and an IBA faculty members. Because you, as an employer, cannot find out everything about a prospective staff member in half an hour interview or 1 hour interview. But when you see him or her for the entire academic year, you can find out whether this is the material which is suitable for us. So it's a win-win situation for the industry because they can discern the kind of expertise they are looking for. And it is good for the boy and the girl who are doing their educational requirements that they have got the skill sets which can make them employable. So this is not the government which has to do. This is the universities and the Higher Education Commission. And unfortunately, our incentive structure is such that a professor or a faculty member has to publish so many articles in a peer-reviewed journal, and then he will get promoted. But if he solves the problem for your company or for other Pakistani company, that is not taken into account for his promotion. And I've been saying, for God's sake, this is an antiquated system. We have so many problems in agriculture, in technology, in engineering, in our social sectors. Let us give them credit for doing work which solves some of our problems. And they should be promoted rather than, somebody who finds a solution to a pest attack on cotton should be given the promotion right away, in my view, rather than expecting him to publish 10 articles in a peer-reviewed journal who only a few individuals can read. I'm an economist, but I tell you, I can't read most of the journals today in economics because they are so sophisticated and they've become so narrow and specialized that if you don't know that field, you won't be able to understand it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I like you, I came to Pakistan after 20 odd years in the Western world, and I find ageism to make your suggestion a practical solution. As an industry, we need to get away from ageism. Like there should be no predisposed notion that a person who's 21 or 20 is not going to be able to solve the problem because that a person who's in the 40s will be able to. I think that notion we have to get away from, which will lead to opportunities, which will lead to excitement and innovation, and it can have a very positive impact on the organization's culture. Let me pivot a little bit. I'm getting a ton of questions on the finance, the IMF, and the state bank. So, so I'm pivoting from technology policy a little bit on that side. Let's get some of those questions answered. So I have an ask. You've been in the state bank. You understand, how the government machinery, how the financial system works. How independent is the state bank, and how innovative is it? Like in your experience, are we usually just following global macro financial policy trends? I know we're impacted by them. How innovative is the state bank to solve some of those problems that are internal to us but may not be prevalent at the global level? Do we see innovation in the state bank typically?
No, we have been given all the constraints, we have been doing innovation in a limited sense. But my problem right now is that the government fiscal situation is so bad that all the money which the banks are, by the way, the state bank was very much responsible for privatization of all these nationalized commercial banks. They were under the government controls. 80%, when I came, 80% of the banking assets were held by the government banks. Today, 80% are held by the private sector, and they are doing extremely well as far as their profitability is concerned. But I'm not happy with that, because what they're doing is they are catering to the demands of the government's fiscal deficits. So the borrowing is not going to the private sector, but it is going to the government sector. At my time, 30% was government, 70% was the private sector. In that, SMEs were getting 17%, agriculture, small farmer was getting 6%, low-cost housing was getting 5%, and other mortgages and consumer was getting 5%. So we were diversifying to meet the demands of our underprivileged and downtrodden people who were not able to raise their incomes because they didn't have access to finance. We introduced Islamic finance because a lot of people told me that they would not borrow from the conventional bank. So we introduced Islamic banking. Then there were small entrepreneurs, especially women, who could not borrow on the basis of collateral or the surety. They didn't have any assets. So we introduced microfinance. And today there are 9 million borrowers in microfinance. But my basic problem is that for the last 4 or 5 years, the government is swallowing up all the deposits of the commercial banks, and the state bank has no alternative but to inject liquidity in order to meet the demand. This is not what the banking sector should be doing. They should be catering to the productive sectors of the economy. We have current account deficits because we are importing $10 billion of food items. This is 80% irrigated agriculture, which is so rare in developing countries. We should be exporting rather than importing. So we have to invest in agriculture, productivity increases for the small farmers, and that will make us, quite comfortable as far as our current account and our external accounts are concerned. We don't have to go and borrow from IMF if we put our house in order. We have deindustrialized. We don't have petrochemical complexes. Our refineries are antiquated. Our steel mill, which we established long time ago, has been closed down since 2015. We don't have the materials, the raw materials, which are important for the downstream industrialization. And if you don't have the industrialization, and if you don't have agriculture productivity, you will be importing. And when you import, you don't have the foreign exchange. And that's why you borrow every time from the foreigners. So this nexus of vicious cycle has to be broken by emphasizing that finances should go for small agriculture, for small and medium enterprises, for IT companies, for technology industry, for tourism industry, those which are going to generate foreign exchange rather than consume the foreign exchange in the country.
So what what can the state bank do to push back on government or to push for fiscal discipline? Because the state bank's trying to meet the needs of the state as well as cater for long-term policy expectations. But what can they do to push back on some of the fiscal discipline or lack thereof?
These are political decisions, and I have written about it. There is my book called Pakistan Economic Challenges and Solutions. And I said, if you tax the agriculture sector by the landlords, not the small farmer, you have all the retail, wholesale distributors who are making millions and they're not paying. The property taxes are a small fragment of what is being collected in India. If you do all that, you will be able to raise your revenues to the extent that you don't have to borrow from the banks. So it is not the state bank. It is the political will. Now we get very scared when the traders come out on the street and they do hartals, they say, oh, and we back down. And this happened even our time, during President Musharraf's time, who was a military dictator. And he imposed these taxes on the traders, and all of them came out on the streets. And because he was going for elections, he withdrew that. So unless we have the political will in order to raise our revenues, this situation, both on the external side as well as the domestic side, will continue.
So share with all of us who want to pick your brain and gain from its experience. What type of guiding principles do you have, or had, or have you developed, which brings about a balance between a medium or short-term policy decisions and long-term policy decisions? Like, how do you think and frame that?
No, that's a very good question, and let me answer you with the article which I wrote for Dawn when this new government came in. I said, for God's sake, do not disturb this 5-year tenure of an elected government, because we had 18 prime ministers between 99 and 2024. So every 2 years, when a prime minister is being kicked out and he's insecure, you think he will take tough political decisions which are unpopular because he's already insecure. And he thinks that if he becomes unpopular, the powers to be, whether judiciary, whether the military, whether others, will try to get him out of the office. So what he does, he has an appeasement policy, which continue business as usual. But we don't need business as usual. But if he's assured that 5 years, nobody would disturb him, there is a compatibility of political incentives and economic incentives which will allow him to take these decisions. For the first 3 years, he would come out and say, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take some unpopular decisions. This will cause you pain. And after few years, this will start paying the dividends. And we don't have to then face this kind of inflation. We don't have to face these electric bills, which we are facing right now. We don't have to go for borrowing from the IMF. We can raise revenues, but allow me for 3 years. And the 4th year, the economy starts picking up. And the 5th year, he's going for elections. And he can say, look, I told you that bear with me the pain. But now you can see that we are moving in the right direction. The economy is moving in the right direction. Vote me in power again, because reforms do not take place in 5 years' time. There are some reforms which takes 8 years, 10 years, and I will do that. And this is the Indian example. You know, Manmohan Singh was there for 10 years. Modi has been there for 10 years. Hasina Wajid was there for 15 years. And look where the economy have gone up. Provided our elite class, which includes both the politicians, the bureaucrats, the professionals like you and me, and the big landlords, as well as the big trading houses, are also willing to make sacrifices. If you have a protocol of 6 cars, and then you have free electricity for the government officials and the ministers, people would not accept your proposition of making pain. They will say, you are enjoying life and you are expecting us to do that. So the first principle is that you cut down the expenditure on the presidents, on the prime ministers, the chief ministers, the bureaucrats, the politicians, everybody, so that they can set an example that, look, we are asking you for sacrifices, but we are also going through that. Unless you don't walk the talk, I don't think you will be successful. So it is a compatibility of the political and economic incentives, which has not taken place so far.
In your experience, do you feel the state bank is equipped with good data to make very informed decisions? So I've had experience in the past where we did an acquisition of a bankrupt multi-billion-dollar entity, and we had to restructure and take it out of bankruptcy, and it's a very difficult problem to solve. In your opinion, being in leadership positions and all, do you feel that the state bank and other government entities are equipped with really good data to make very precise decisions with low resources?
Well, I would say that's not perfect, but if you go to the website of State Bank of Pakistan and then to its data warehouse, you will find data of all kinds as compared to any other government organization. I'm not saying this is perfect, but relative terms, you can find data about anything which you're looking for. But today's data is not the usual collection of, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. You have to do real time. Real-time data is available to the officials of the state bank for decision making, but it is not shared publicly because there are, privacy and confidentiality questions. But we have now a very good data warehouse where all the data is collected. Now, I think the state bank has to go for big data and data analytics, and that will give them much better insight. I go to, areas like Okada, Sahiwal, Daska, Jung, and what I see there is not actually captured in our national or regional data.
That's what my thought was.
Yeah, that is what is missing is that right now with the satellite imaging, with the sensors, you should be able to, capture a lot of information and data in real time. And that is where the agenda for the state bank is, that they have to work with the Ministry of Defense Production and others to bring in these technological tools in order to capture the data in real time and take action from that.
So, as laymen, and I'm going to ask a very basic question. We look at a lot of metrics to assess where we stand as an economy. We'll look at the growth rate, we'll look at the dollar rate, we'll look at, 5 or 6 basic metrics, which are publicly, there's a focus on them. If you were to predict, say, in 5 years' time, roughly, give or take, 4 to 5 years, what combination of metrics do you feel we should be looking at achieving? The combination, right? So in your experience, you may say, hey, 4% growth, but this. We'd love to be educated in terms of how should we look at it. So we don't look at individual metrics, but we look at the combination of metrics that you feel if they exist, we have done the work we should be doing at a foundational level today.
Very fair question. Like a medical doctor looks at the vital signs. He doesn't look at one particular indicator.
Correct.
The economists also look at a set of indicators. And the most important indicator is the growth rate of the economy. Why is it? Because growth is very much connected with employment. And when you have 1.8 million young men and women entering your workforce every year, you have to find jobs for them. Why Hasina was thrown out? Because there were no jobs being created, although the GDP growth there was 6 to 7%. So it has to be a quality of growth which creates productive jobs. That I think is the balanced approach. You can have 6% growth, but no jobs being created. You're not helping anybody. Second, your poverty reduction is now very much tied in all over the world with high growth rate. But when I say high growth rate, I qualify it has to be inclusive growth rate. It has to be sustained growth rate. We had 2 years of high growth rate, and then again we were down to negative growth rate. That is not sustained growth rate. Why is sustained growth rate is important? Because investment drives the growth, and private sector is the engine of investment. If they know that these policies will continue over 4 or 5 years, during the time we are making our investment, they will invest. But if they know that after 2 years, new policies would come in, you think anybody will go and invest? They won't. Therefore, growth is important, but it has to be inclusive and sustained growth, which means the policy continuity and consistency. In my book, Development Pathways, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, 1947-2022, this is a lesson which I derive from the 75 years of economic journey. Dictatorship, democracy, hybrid forms of government are not important. It is the consistency, continuity, and predictability of the economic policies which lead to higher growth. Now, there are problems in higher growth. If it is captured by the elites, which has been done in the case of Pakistan, you would have dissatisfied population. So what do I suggest? I suggest the local government system, which worked quite well in Pakistan between 2001 to 2007, where the elected mayors and elected councils are given the authorization, powers, and resources to run schools, hospitals, clinics, water supply, sewage, solid waste disposal, public parks, roads. These are the activities which an ordinary citizen wants. And they will be able to contribute to that tax pool because they know that the benefits of their taxes will accrue to them because this is all being invested there. Now the money goes somewhere in Islamabad in a black box, and they don't know whether it is going to benefit from us. So local governments, duly elected, without any interference, is the solution to raise the satisfaction of the general public and solve their day-to-day problems. That is the way growth, along with the devolution of powers and resources to the local government. Communities can take decisions better than government. And I have been on both sides. I was secretary planning. I would approve 500 schools, not knowing whether there is a need for this school. There will be teachers. But now when I go to this councils who are local, they say we don't need a school. We need a pathway to connect the two schools so that our girls can go there. They are in a much better position to judge as to what their requirements are. So that, I think, is what is required for growth, which is inclusive and sustained.
I was reading somewhere that the correlation between growth, the Fed, at least in the US, is looking at remodeling the correlation between growth and employment in the next 5 years because of the advent of AI. So that'll be a very, very interesting study on how they look at that, because clearly with the advent of AI, there will be some changes. And changes always happen when technology comes in and makes a shift. But they're feeling that it'll be very, very accelerated. So when I come across that study, I'll send you something just to take a look at it. I'd love to pick your brain on a follow-up conversation. I want to take a couple of questions from the chat. I know a bunch of them are coming in. Ali, do I just read them off there, or do you open this up for direct questions?
I think you can just read from here.
Okay. All right. So one question, a little different, is on climate change. It's a very global problem. Everybody from every walk of life has a view on it. I think about it in Pakistan. I'm a trekker. I like going in the mountains, and whenever I hear about flooding and glaciers melting, obviously, it breaks my heart. We are not a very, very rich country to allocate a lot of capital to that problem, a lot of resources to that problem, but we know we're the epicenter of it. What would you recommend would be a good solution to address that locally, internationally? How should people look at that?
three-pronged approach. First, your transportation is a big emitter of carbon dioxide. That is an area where we have to move for all the motorbikes to move towards electric vehicles. That is, and you have electricity which is in surplus. We are paying capacity payment, which is 70% of the total charge. So you have the charging stations and you have the motorbikes, which are electrically charged. You will have a lot of reduction in your fuel imports, which will also help your balance of payment situation. Number two, your energy mix has to move away from these fossil fuels towards the natural, like the wind, solar, and hydro. And Pakistan has very good hydro resources, which are capital intensive. But we have to move away from imported RLNG, imported HSD, imported petroleum, and those are not really what we require. And because of the third coal, we should try to increase our utilization of the third coal for those plants which are being run on imported fuel. So that will also reduce, although coal is not a very desirable, but for the short term, because our consumption is only few percent or less than 10%. And India is 70%, China is 60%. So we can afford for some time, unless we have solar. And solar is becoming so cheap, thanks to Chinese, that it's now being adopted even by families and individuals. The second or third is the food energy nexus. That means that our water resources have to be conserved. The glaciers are melting, the pattern is erratic, and unless we capture that, we will have droughts and we will have floods, which is not going to help you in your cultivation, because you are an irrigated country and you have to make rain harvesting, storage, groundwater extraction, so that you can capture the water, not only in the dams, but also check dams and other reservoirs which can meet the needs of the people. And then seeds in your varieties of seeds have to be drought resistant and without losing their germination, because one of the problems is that you have a trade-off between the yields and the seed quality. So you have to find through research those kind of seeds which are compatible with the vexing climate vulnerabilities. So these are the three areas where you have to work on climate change.
No, fair enough. I think it's a very, very complicated problem. I do feel international capital is very interested to work with us to solve it. I've not seen very creative solutions in the local space to protect some of the natural resources, prevent some of the disasters the world is predicting by 2030 in Pakistan. I think if a lot of people if some people came up with some solutions in that space, it would be very, very helpful for us. I have another question regarding local capital. So I invest local capital in the technology space as a fundamental part of our thesis. A lot of people want to know, because you are in the banking industry, you understand local industrial capitalist mindset as well. What advice would you give to different startups, young people creating technology solutions on how should they look at their financial metrics? What are the key things that they should focus on more to attract more local capital in this space? Because in an ideal situation, local capital fueling export is the magic solution. Growth with the borrowing capital isn't ideal. What would you recommend? Give them some insight from your experiences.
You're absolutely right. And I've been, wondering about the difference between India, where the personal offices of the big, billionaires are investing as angel investor, as venture capitalists, even as accelerators and mature companies. And this doesn't happen in Pakistan. And I wanted to find out what the problem is. Wherever you have rent-seeking opportunities, where you have assured return on your capital, which is quite substantial, and you have guarantees of the government, and you get your capital back in 1 or 2 years, who would like to hazard, their money going into a venture capital where 6 or 7 out of 10 venture capital new startups actually fail? We don't have the appetite for taking that risk because our culture and our ecosystem is so much attuned to guaranteed rate of returns on the back of the government policies that these entrepreneurs who are quite well to do and who can afford to lose some money even if they want to, they are shirking from this particular investment. And some of my friends, they are my friends, when I plead to them, they said, oh, हमने किया था, वो हमारा 1 million जो है वो गायब हो गया, खत्म हो गया. I said, there's nothing. You make another 1 million and maybe you can get 10 million out of it. Because if your company succeeds, you will get 10 times that. And this is what the international experience is. But if you are not a serial entrepreneur and you have one investment which goes sour and then you withdraw your hands, you're not in the game. This mindset, I think, is something which needs to be changed. And that will be changed if we don't have IPP's kind of policies, 17% dollar index rate of return to guaranteed by take or pay. That has set the entire mindset.
Fair enough. Fair enough. A lot of people who are listening to you today, some of are in the government sector, some are in the private sector. Everyone struggles with organizational reform. They want to do things internally so that they are more relatable by global organizations. How they structure, how they deliver. You touched upon it in terms of work ethic earlier on in our conversation. Any 2 or 3 advices you would give them, both, give a couple of advice on the government side and maybe cover it on the private side because both have different constraints on what should they do in terms of organizationally structuring that will make them more productive and more relatable by global players.
Ahsan, I don't have to give advice. I have left with the government, previous government and this government, a whole volume of structural governance reforms, which starts with the reorganization of the federal government, then the entire value chain of the civil service, right from induction to the severance, then privatization of the state-owned enterprises. These volumes are available with the government. And now I am told that this government is trying to do some of those reforms. But the work has already been done. I did 3 years. We had a task force on both these subjects. We went around the whole country, consulted more than 3,000 people in various walks of the life, 67 consultative sessions. We listened to their views and then prepared this report. So this was discussed in the government by a cabinet committee. It was approved by the cabinet, Imran Khan's cabinet, but it was not implemented. The more we are delaying this, the more losses. My report on the PIA restructuring was in September 2021. At that time, the losses, the cumulative losses of PIA were only 500 billion. Today, they have 750 billion. That means we have lost 250 billion in last 3 years by not taking action. So delayed actions, delayed policy decisions, laziness, passing on the buck, those are the problems which are not allowing us. And then you have vested interest. So my colleagues in the civil service are not very happy when I say, open it up, the Ministry of IT should not be headed by a bureaucrat, it should be headed by a professional. Now they feel that this is going to be a loss of their prestige and their power and the perks. So they oppose these kind of reforms. And because they are very close to the government in power, in the politicians, and the politicians also want to retain their power, this is what the impediment is.
You know, with the tools we have, I'm going to go get this volume. I'm going to try and see if we can create a Cliff Notes version of this, just for general public, awareness, and so that they can hold our representatives accountable for some of that change. I think that if this material exists, it needs to be studied. It needs to be made very easily available for people to digest who don't have the sophistication, the economic sophistication of yourself, but can still understand, the ask in that. One last question, Dr. Ishrat. In my experience in Pakistan, I've noticed that not a lot of people try to achieve the big goal and protect some of their interests. So I'm not going to pass judgment on individual interests or individual wealth creation goals, right? Through the right means. But I don't find people balancing the achievement of the big goal and prioritizing that while also making sure that their own individual and personal goals grow. Is that something that you've noticed, that both things don't go together in our private and public sector, or is that something that is I'm only witnessing it?
I'm afraid it is not limited to either the government sector or the private sector. It is all across the country. Even very, accomplished professionals who have worked abroad, when they come to Pakistan, they also fall in this trap, which is the personal interest trumps the national interest. That is our theory. I am a medical doctor. I will see only patient for 5 minutes and ask him to come to my clinic, and I will refer him to the laboratory with which I have connections, to the pharmacy with which I have connections, and that is what happens. And this is documented. By the way, this is not just something which I'm inventing. In my book, Governing the Ungovernable, if you look, I've gone beyond blaming the government for everything. I said the society itself does not behave, then we are not going to get anything out of this country. So blame game is all right. The private sector blames the government, corrupt people, and the government blames the private sector, that the private sector is rent seeking, and the private sector is not happy to work with the accountability of the NGOs, and the NGOs are complaining against the excessive control of the government. Everybody is in that rut. They're not working together. And my favorite countries are Japan, Korea, and China. And you have heard the term Japan Inc., that is Japan Incorporated, China Incorporated, Korea Incorporated, where everybody works together. The private sector, the public sector, and the civil society organization. They are not fighting with each other. They are not confronting with each other, but they are complementing and supplementing each other. And that's why these countries, despite such difficult circumstances, have progressed. As you remember, China now has become a threat to the United States. Japan had become a threat in the 1990s. Everybody was talking about Japan overtaking the United States. And Korea is an example where its per capita income was lower than Pakistan, now is an OECD country. So this is the key. This is the key. Work together. हमारे यहाँ तो लड़ते हैं एक दूसरे से, हर वक्त एक दूसरे को blame करते हैं. That is not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I pray that people realize that it is better to have a medium size piece of the pie, of a big pie, than a big piece of a very small pie. I think if people understood that sentiment, that you focus on growing the size of the pie, not just your piece and in one. I think everybody would work more in harmony. We really appreciate your time. I think we could go another hour picking your brain, and I'm sure that Ali will probably bother you again for a conversation. Really thank you for your time. Appreciate the insights, and we'll, if we have follow-on questions, we'll probably bug you and get them on in writing.
Just for you and Ali, I have not appeared on any television show or any social media for last 6 years. I think this is an exception because you're all professionals, and I thought I can talk to you. When I go to the talk shows, they have their own agenda and they won't let me complete my thought, and they would interrupt. So I've stopped going there since 2018. I just went for my book to one of the YouTubers, which was 2-hour session. So I could say what I wanted to say. But other than that, I made an exception in your case and Ali's, because you're all very highly educated professionals, and you are the agents of change, in my view, given the importance of technology. If we can motivate you guys, I think the country will take off.
No, we pray for that, and I'm reading Ali's comments in there. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We know you're a busy person who doesn't like to get into useless conversations, and we appreciate the insight. The community appreciates it. The Paklaunch platform is very thankful, and I'm sure that if you'll give us time again, we'd love to have you over and have some more questions.
It will be a pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.